Welcome to Six in the City, the podcast where 620-somethings talk about shit and some of them live in cities.
I'm Jen.
I'm Lexi.
I'm Nancy.
I'm Elena.
I'm Jane.
And I'm Robin. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Six in the City podcast. I'm Robin, and we have Jen, Nancy, Elena, and Jane with us today. And we're going to be talking about imposter syndrome. Boo. Boo. But it's a very real topic, and I think it's been very prevalent for a lot of people. So just to get us started, how would you guys define imposter syndrome?
I was actually going to ask you to define it.
I can define it too. I have a definition prepared. Do you want me to define it?
Yes.
Okay. I'm taking this from a workshop that I helped to present. So basically, imposter syndrome can be defined as the traits and behaviors of high-achieving individuals who, despite their objective success, have difficulty internalizing their accomplishments. So it could also be known as self-doubt or fear of being exposed as a quote fraud or as a quote imposter. But it's basically thinking that you've been lucky rather than having earned your success or your accomplishments. So that's sort of some definitions to what imposter syndrome is. So just to kind of start off, I would love to know if each of you feels imposter syndrome, and if you do, in what areas of your life. But also, if you don't feel imposter syndrome, then please share that. We want to celebrate that. Don't feel like you have to be feeling like an imposter to be in this conversation.
I think most recently I've been feeling it a lot because I have been job searching casually. And I noticed even when I'm in so the whole process, from looking at a job posting to going through submitting, my resume and my application, to going through the interview process, I feel imposter syndrome every step of the way. One thing I've noticed is when I'm looking at a job posting, sometimes I feel like I'm actively looking for that one qualification that they're looking for that I don't meet, to kind of prepare myself. So basically I'm rejecting myself
For
them. Yeah. And in my way, my reasoning is I'm saving myself and their time by finding, a reason why I might not get this job. And even just been feeling that a lot. And I don't know,
do you still apply for these jobs?
I do, because I have been seeing a lot of career advice on TikTok. So it's just it knows what I'm going through, and a lot of people say, and I think it's common that a lot of women kind of tend to apply to places they're overqualified for, or at least tend to apply less to jobs that they feel underqualified for compared to men, if that makes sense. So I've been trying to channel that confidence and still apply to things if I don't meet all of the qualifications. And I actually do see a lot of job postings where they explicitly say please apply even if you don't meet a certain hard requirement that they have. So I have been trying more, and there's other aspects of the job search where I do feel like a fake, but I think that aspect is one thing I can immediately think of.
No, I think it's really good that you still apply. I read this somewhere, and I don't remember the specific numbers, but it was men apply to jobs even if they only meet 30%. I'm making this up, but it was a really low number. If they only meet 30% of the job qualifications, whereas women won't apply unless she meets 80 or 90 or something a lot higher. So I think
it's the Harvard Business Review.
Maybe, I don't know. But yeah, I think it's really good. You still got to do it. And I think a lot of inequality in the workplace between men and women, a lot of it is self-imposed. I think kind of going off of that into more detail is when I'm looking for jobs and thinking about salary and compensation, I'm I think this would be good, it's appropriate, I feel comfortable asking for this number. And then I ask my male friends, and they're like, no, you should obviously ask for like a much higher number. I'm like, oh, but like I don't deserve it. I only have like a year and a half of experience. And they're like, no, you deserve it, Jane. Like I would never like go for that, like low of a number. So I think unfortunately a lot of challenges, I wouldn't say like challenges necessarily, but like a lot of this, not a lot, some of it is definitely self-imposed between like men and women in the workplace.
Something someone told me recently is that women should operate with the confidence of a mediocre white man. And I've never, never heard something truer, because it's true. Like white men don't let anything stop them. Sometimes not even the law. So like in cases like this, we're only putting ourselves further behind and at a disadvantage because we're self-screening or self-rejecting, like Jen said. But it's like it's ingrained in us as women sometimes.
I mean, I feel it like every day in my current role, because my job that I'm in, the industry is not one that I anticipated being in. I'm like really glad that I'm in it, but in terms of the topic area that I'm in, didn't really have that much experience, even though like the academic background that I am in is very relevant. Everything else around it is not something I have a lot of experience in. It's something that I'm always learning. So I always feel like when I'm expected to talk or share my experiences, I always tell my project managers, like, I don't have the professional knowledge or experience. And they always have to remind me, well, you have your experience, as an individual, and that itself is very valid. The area that I'm in is like a very like sensitive topic. And so then, people are sometimes afraid to make mistakes, and that includes me as well, especially I'm in consulting. And so then when we talk with clients, you want to make sure that, you know and understand what you're talking about, right? Because they're hiring you for a reason, they're hiring you for your expertise. So it's something that I am still constantly going through. Like every day, I feel like I'm always learning new things, which is good, but it also goes to show that there's still a lot more for me to learn, which adds on to the whole imposter syndrome thing, right? It's like, when will I eventually feel like I'll be a quote unquote expert? And I know they say that you have to like spend like, I think like, is it like 10,000 hours or something like that? Yeah, like 10,000 hours in something to truly be an expert. So if you work theoretically like 8 hours a day, like what's the math?
Yeah, you work like 2,000 hours per year. That's like 5 years of experience doing this.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So 5 years. So I have to be in this role for 5 years to be considered like an expert, right? So I always like remind myself that it'll take time, and I'm in here less than a year.
Yeah, for me, I definitely feel imposter syndrome like every day, especially in law school. I feel like I'm exposing myself, but the school that I go to, I didn't get in right away. I got in off the wait list. So that just like adds to it a lot. Even though I know that a lot of people, like law schools waitlist people all the time and it's like super normal, but it still adds to it. And like even in my job, so I submitted a memo recently and I was like very, I didn't feel very good about it. But my boss was like, no, this is actually like really great. I don't know why you didn't think like highly of yourself, blah, blah, blah. You should have more confidence. And I was like, I don't know. I just feel like, I'm not qualified enough to talk about this topic. Yeah, that's it.
No, that's so valid. And it's like hearing everyone speak, I also realized with the definition that I shared earlier about how those with imposter syndrome have difficulty internalizing their accomplishments. Like what I'm hearing a lot is that we tend to internalize like our mistakes and our failures, but we externalize our successes and our accomplishments. But no, I totally agree with what everyone said. And I think it's definitely more prevalent in like work or school, because there's already this sense of needing to prove yourself, because there's so many things equated to the value of the work that you're doing, and whether it's your salary or if you're up for a promotion or just like words of affirmation from your supervisor or whatnot. So there's a few statements that I'll read that kind of reflect some traits of feeling imposter syndrome. So I would love to know if some of these statements resonate with you all, and maybe in what areas of your life, or like how much you agree. Because I know for me, I don't agree with everything, but I do agree with some. So I'll just go ahead. So when people praise you, you fear that you won't live up to their expectations.
24/7.
I think for me, it's more like retrospective. I'm like really? Like, you thought this was good? Why though? Yeah.
I really value words of affirmation, probably a lot more than I should in a professional setting. So I hold on to it. So for me, if they say something, I don't question it. I'm just like, thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. And that's valid, because sometimes if you're the one who's making yourself feel down, then you really put more value in what other people say to like alleviate that imposter syndrome. So that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
We'll just keep going.
I like it.
You're afraid others will discover how little you know.
Oh, they already know.
No, I feel that statement too.
Every single day for me.
Yeah, I think with this one, it's like it throws me off a little bit because it's less of, for me personally, how little I know, but because I don't know, you hear a lot of those like memes or affirmations that like no one really knows what they're doing in their life and everyone's just kind of faking it till they make it, or it seems that way on the outside. So I think that this kind of relates to that, and that you need to act like you know what you're doing, but really all of us are just learning as we go. But it's more, for me, it's less that I'm scared of people discovering how little I know, but more that I don't think I can prove to them that I know.
Right.
If that makes sense.
That's valid.
Thank you. Okay, so the next statement. You feel that you need to work harder than others in order to prove your worth.
Not at this job for me,
Me too.
but
Oh,
my other
interesting.
job, I like brought it up even to my overseeing manager, feeling that I had to prove that I was able to do it harder. And like we had these like full discussions. And eventually I felt like I gained their trust. I vented to my supervisor and then about other people, you know. So I felt like then I was able to gain the trust. And I think I saw that and I was able to really recognize when my work got easier because of that. So I felt like I had the proof and the validation that I did need to work harder. And then when it did happen, it further validated that I was right.
Why do you think you needed to work harder?
I think that in my team, I was the only girl, and I was also the only girl that was hired in with less objective experience in that industry than everyone else. So I always felt like I had to do more vouching. I don't think it was consciously my gender, but I think my gender might have, I shouldn't say gender. I think it was my age. My age really had a lot to do with that, and my lack of experience compared to everyone else. But then I was able to prove that I was able to, you know, do it as just as better as everyone else.
Yeah,
I definitely feel your statement, Robin.
Sorry, what was the statement again?
You feel you need to work harder than others in order to prove your worth.
I think it's just the fact that like I'm in school and like the rankings are like available, so you can like literally see who's doing better than you.
God, rankings are so, that's really.
I guess for me, like in my current job, I don't really feel this statement, just because when I joined with like 3 other people at the same level as me, and even my direct manager had only joined a few weeks before me, and just the team just was a bit newer and there was just a lot of changes going on. So I think all of those factors combined, it was more of like an even playing field, if that made sense. I didn't feel as pressured to like compare myself and really try harder to prove myself more than I had to, you know, because everyone was kind of like learning and doing things new for the first time all together. So I think I got lucky with that kind of work environment. So I don't think I've had that kind of experience in my current job, luckily.
We love an equal playing field.
Next statement. You feel your success is due to luck despite your actual achievements and hard work.
Yes. Well, so like with my current job, it is my first full-time job, you know, after graduating. And even now, I really consider the fact that I got a job pretty quickly after graduating due to luck, and just like luck in general. I always tell people I'm really lucky to have this job, and it's like hard for me to really relate it to my resume or like my accomplishment, which is I'm sure is a reason why I got the job, you know, but I keep on thinking that I just got lucky, and I just happened to apply at the right time, the right moment, and I happened to be available, and so on and so forth.
I definitely feel that way, but it's weird because it doesn't make me feel like bad. I feel like grateful that I got lucky, if that makes sense. Like it doesn't make me feel like my accomplishments are like lesser because I kind of realize that like a lot of stuff in life is like due to luck. So I'm just like, oh, like cool, I got this cool opportunity because I got lucky, but it's not like a negative thing for me.
I definitely agree with Elena. I think it's like probably like 10% luck or whatever.
Percent
Like-
skill, 15.
Right. I like thought of that song. I was like, where did this come from? Why did 10% pop into my mind? Like Jen said that, you know, applying to the right posting company in the right time, the right place, like that definitely, like the right mood of the hiring manager, the interview, you know, like that all plays a part. But for me, it doesn't undermine what I did and had to do to get to where I am. For me, I know what I had to do to get there, and it was more than just luck, even though, you know, a lot of good things had to settle into place at the right time. But also, I feel like it was also my own effort that brought me to where I needed to be.
I'll definitely agree with the luck thing. I think even starting from my current job, I didn't apply the conventional route. I didn't do on-campus recruiting. And then when I got the offer, they were also like, rank your top 3 location choices. And I think I got really lucky that I got my first choice. And I know that it wasn't common to relocate grads from DC to New York. So I think that was really lucky. I think they just like needed more headcount in New York, coincidentally at that time.
I don't know. Well, like everyone, like the statement says luck, but I want to share something that I remember reading on one of those like Tumblr posts back in the day about what luck is. And it was something like luck is when like opportunity meets hard work. And I think that's really changed how I view the term luck, and especially in how it relates to the definition of imposter syndrome. But like Elena said earlier, it doesn't make me feel bad, but it's more I feel grateful because I know that it was good timing. But at the same time, if I didn't work hard for it or I didn't do what I needed to do, then I wouldn't have gotten that achievement or whatever, because that opportunity could have gone to someone else. So like Jen shared, you know, you had your resume and you applied to that job and it happened to work out. Like, no, it's your qualifications and experience matched up, and it was opportunity meeting hard work. And so I think that that's something that it depends on people's definition of what luck is and understanding like how they relate to imposter syndrome. But that's how I view that. Next statement. When you succeed, you have doubts about being able to do it again.
I mean, I don't really know. I can't think of any like concrete examples, but I just feel like every time I do something, I feel like I did it, kind of just threw it together. And I'm just like not confident I could do that product again. Or if I just like do something like a big project and I think about doing it again, I'm like, there's absolutely no way I could possibly do this again. I just would not have it in me. I guess it's kind of different, but still kind of the same.
Makes sense.
I don't know if this is exactly what the statement is saying, but there are times where I feel like if I were to apply to the job that I'm in now at a different time, I felt like I wouldn't have gotten in or gotten the job. And I think it goes back to, I guess, the luck and being the right time and place. But I think what I agree with, I think it's more so like being at the circumstances that I am now. If it was any other time or situation, I might not be where I am.
This is the last statement. You always have a backup plan in case you're discovered for the fraud that you believe yourself to be. So a little harsh of a statement. But yeah, basically you have a backup plan.
I think my go-to is I just try to be as transparent as possible. So for example, like when I'm interviewing, I'll just straight up say it, like, for example, like a technical skill, they'll be like, oh, do you have experience with this language? And I'm like, oh, I've like worked in that language like years ago in class, but I can't say that I've worked professionally with it. I haven't touched it in a few years. I'm just like very transparent. But then with things that I am confident in with other languages that I know and have used, I fluff it up a little bit more. So it's kind of like I'm balancing it, right? It's like I kind of try to go for like that middle ground. But yeah, I think even with like projects, since I'm in consulting, every new project, I just straight up say, oh, I don't have experience with this, but I'm eager to learn. I feel like that's the key phrase, eager and willing to learn. And yeah, I'm like, if I fail, I was honest with them. I told them not to expect anything, so it's really on them, not me.
That's true.
I mentioned in our part-time job episode that I used to be a nail technician, and you have to be licensed for that. My Florida nail technician license is actually still valid. You have to renew it like every 2 years or so, and you have to like retake like a continuing education, like health and hygiene exam, and then like pay a renewal fee. And my family always makes me, every time it comes up, like make sure that I do it, even though I hate doing nails. I no longer live in Florida. And I feel like for me, a safety backup would probably be to go back to a recruiting industry. But for them, it's always like even further, like, what if you just, can't even make it in that? So I think they kind of push it on me a little bit. So I do have a backup plan, but it's not something that I ever want to really think about.
And I think all these statements, we don't want people to feel related to it, because that is a sign of imposter syndrome. But I think it's also okay to normalize that everyone feels it, which is, I guess, leads into my next question. But I was talking to someone who's like 3 positions higher than me in my office, and she was telling me that she herself still feels imposter syndrome to this day. And then that made me feel like, oh shit, I'm not even good enough to feel imposter syndrome. Like, who am I? And I feel like it was very meta. So I wanted to ask that question to you all too. Like, do you ever feel like, even in the scope of imposter syndrome, that sometimes you aren't good enough to feel it? Or I don't know, that weird road of how to validate it, but also like work through it.
I think I mentioned in the Discord, like I saw a meme on Twitter, and it was literally just like a woman on a laptop, and then the title was, "Are you even good enough to have imposter syndrome?" It still sticks with me because it's so true. It's like, what I'm thinking valid? Like, am I
always valid?
Right, but like the definition of imposter syndrome is like you have to have demonstrated success. So
Right,
it's like
right.
I feel imposter
Objective
syndrome about whether or
success.
not I even fit the definition. Like I don't have any demonstrated success. You know what I mean?
No, it's the
am I
objective.
overestimating
Literally in law
myself?
school, Elena.
That's
you have
not-
demonstrated success.
I'm failing. No, I'm kidding. I'm not failing. But
the strategy to cope with imposter syndrome, one of them is to redefine your definition of success. Because even with what you said, Elena, earlier, of like, you have to demonstrate success, and have I demonstrated success enough to even feel imposter syndrome? Like, yes, you have. And success can be seen as anything from getting a job, getting into a certain school, to getting positive feedback, to just getting a compliment from a colleague. Like, it can be anything that you define it. And so, full circle, I think anyone should feel eligible or valid to feel imposter syndrome. But it's definitely this vicious cycle, I think, because we don't want people to feel it. But if you do feel it, it's valid, and you shouldn't be so hard on yourself. So since we've all pretty much affirmed that we experience imposter syndrome in some way or another, how do you deal with the imposter syndrome? Are there any methods that you use to like combat it, or actively try to remind yourself that you are worth it and you have value and you are successful due to not just luck but your hard work? Is there anything that you do? Jen is shaking her head no.
Nothing actively like on my end that I do, which is bad. So if anyone has any tips, please share.
I feel like the thing that helps me the most is just to think about the fact that like everyone else is pretty much feeling the same way I do. We're all going through it. So
that's so hard for me to really grasp, like understand, because like whenever I see people around me, like I can't imagine that they're feeling the same way
true
that I am, because they look so like, because it is really like fake it till you make it, and obviously like you don't know what someone's going through behind their work mask or whatever. But that's so hard for me personally to really understand even today, even though I know it's true.
I guess imposter syndrome in the workplace with like my leadership and my managers, I just try to create like that genuine connection. I'm like, hey, like I'm really struggling with this. I feel like I don't understand like the industry, because like consulting, you're just thrown into, well, for me, I'm more aligned to a function as opposed to industry. So I kind of work cross industry. So whenever you go into a new industry, you have to relearn all the verbiage, just like all the like details. So I think it's really helpful to just connect outside of like the scope of the project, being like, I'm really struggling with this. Like, is this normal? And I think what to me good leadership means is like they're able to understand and also like help you through that. I think my current project, everyone's struggling. And I think it's really helped to just establish that we're all struggling. So it's kind of like I don't feel imposter syndrome because I know everyone on the team is struggling. So I think just kind of opening that space for discussion and having those conversations has been really helpful for me.
It's like normalizing the pain.
Like if you suffer, like there's nothing stronger for team, like better for team bonding than suffering together.
Trauma bonding. Truly.
It's like funny because like if everyone has imposter syndrome, I feel like we all work through it together.
Who's the imposter? And it's just a game of Among Us.
Exactly.
So I'm a complete hoe for words of affirmation, like I've said many times throughout this podcast and probably throughout many episodes. So when I've learned that about myself, like gives me a serotonin boost, especially if it's unprompted and just unexpected. I have from all of my previous jobs, including this one, an email folder that says positivity with a smiley face. So every time that I have an email that reminds me and validates my achievements and my success and just who I am in that role, I'll just move it to that folder. And then when I feel really down, then I'll look into that folder and, I'll just scroll through, and it gives me a reminder that even if it's a hard day, there are people out there who do believe in me. And so then it gives me like a little motivation and a push. So I have that for every single full-time job that I've been in so far, that little positivity, smiley face inbox folder.
Yes, I love that. I second that too. I don't have an email folder, but I take screenshots. So if it is an email or a nice text or even a comment or just anything that is really nice and like complimentary, I know for me personally, in the moment, I just can't accept praise. Like it makes me so uncomfortable, and I will, like, my first instinct is to just dismiss it. So I do screenshot it so I can process it later, because I think that I don't give myself the time and room to do that. I think that's also just the problem with like imposter syndrome, is that it's just so much internalized lack of self-confidence. Not to say that everyone is like feeling lack of confidence. For me personally, I think it comes from a place of lack of confidence, where I will look to other people for validation. Even if other people validate me, though, it's like I'm still like, oh, what's wrong with me? Like I'm not going to be able to do this again or whatnot. But something that I've been trying to do is they're not self-affirmations, because I find that really hard to do. Just personally, I'm not very good with like meditation or self-affirmations, but I do write down my strengths. So even if it's like the most minute thing, so like you guys have heard, I've been talking a lot about being good at Tetris, because I realized I am really good at Tetris. So I wrote that down. I am good at Tetris. Like I have good typing skills. Like I am really good at taking initiative about things. And so any small thing that comes up, whether it's in work or in personal life or school, I'll like write it down so that so it feels a little bit more permanent and concrete, and then I can go back to it too. And it's something that comes from my own confidence as opposed to something someone else told me. So I have both, because I think both can benefit you, and both different people will find value in different ways. But I know for me personally, because I lack so much of that self-confidence, I need to work more towards those self-validation sorts of things. So that's something I would recommend for anyone if they want to.
I really like that idea.
That's all the questions I had. Any final statements about imposter syndrome? Maybe you want to tell yourself right now, or anyone who might be listening that is also going through it.
Whenever you ask for compensation, ask for like 20% higher than you think you're worth.
Apply for that job, bitch. Don't let yourself rule yourself out.
Yeah,
Let them do it. Worst case scenario, it was a no anyways, People feel it and it's valid. And
well, thank you everyone for sharing your little tidbits of your experience and your advice when it comes to imposter syndrome. I want everyone who's listening to feel validated in their own feelings, but also hopefully you learned some ways to combat it and work against it. I think it's important that you surround yourself with people who are going to uplift you and that you uplift yourself. Know your worth. So that's it for this episode. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Six in the City. You can follow us on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter at sixinthecitypod.
This episode was edited by Robin, with music brought to you by Gandhira Pratama.